Welcome, everybody. Good evening.
Good afternoon.
How are you today? Welcome to episode 14 of our podcast, which we are excited. Are we excited to announce?
I would use the word excited, yes.
We are excited to announce a shift. So we talked about last week, we were kind of starting this 13-week SelfJournal.
Yeah, oh, by the way.
Go ahead.
He's Ryan Stanley.
All day long, and she is definitely Theresa and Ryan.
Most days.
Thank you for joining us for what we are now calling the Coachy
Shit podcast.
Because really, that's what we talk about for the most part.
Coachy Shit. High five. We're doing it. We're going live.
So Coachy Shit. So you may notice by now that we changed some of our stuff on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm not sure about Facebook. I have to figure that out still because I'm not sure.
Might be an SHT.
Yeah, or apostrophe or something.
I don't know.
But we just started, as we were setting up our next 13 weeks, we started kind of analyzing what we're doing now, what we like about it, where we see our brand growing and growing.
And just kind of doing the thing. And, you know, it is about unattachment, but it's really, I mean, every time somebody asks about, like, oh, what were you and Ryan talking about on the podcast? Or, hey, what's that about? Or what are you guys doing? What's the answer?
It's like, you know, Coachy Shit.
Coachy Shit, you know?
So, which actually showed up in our very first episode.
It did.
We just were not aware enough to see it.
See, we keep talking about these future episodes and how we mention things. Right. This is obviously one of those times.
This is episode 14 where we mentioned Coachy Shit.
Coachy Shit, yeah. So welcome to Coachy Shit.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, other people don't always know what unattached even means. So they're not aware of the value of being attached or unattached, and so it's not real clear. And so we just thought, you know, let's just break it down.
Yeah.
You got to be 18.
There's a waiver.
In order to enjoy our podcast.
You got to sign a thing.
Yeah. So we're here, episode 14 still, though, because we're keeping the numbers.
Yeah, I need a little structure in my life.
14, the Coachy Shit podcast. Welcome.
It's happening. And actually, right before we jumped on this, we were going through the list, which we covered in episode 13.
Right, to figure out what we might want to discuss today.
Possibly. And one of the things that's on here is all about, surprisingly, attachment. And how attachment is a lack mentality.
Correct.
And you go further on the list to say, this is kind of a longer post for the list, which was really...
It was a Sunday night. I was deep thought.
Yeah, definitely. Deep in the thought. And
deep into something.
Those waiters.
Right.
Really trudging through. And it says, attachment is a lack mentality. If everything you want exists in the eventuality, then there is no lack and nothing to be attached to.
Yeah. So
what do you mean by exists in the actuality? In actuality, is that what you meant?
No, the eventuality, meaning like one day this is occurring, right? If I believe that, I've decided that. So even if I'm attached to it not happening now or how I want it to occur, but I'm still want it to happen and I feel like it's not going to. If I've already decided that it is going to happen, just not necessarily at my pace or process.
It's going to come to pass, but maybe not in the way that you're super attached to happening.
Right. Then why would I be? Then why? That really. So here's where it started.
Okay.
I'll dial it back.
Dial it back.
Thank you.
We're going back.
So it all dials down to parenthood often for me. But I noticed with my children that when they're misbehaving, you know, we might say, hey, listen, you know, if you continue to behave that way, you're not going to be able to go to your friend's house on Wednesday, or we're not going to be able to have friends over to go swimming, or you're not going to...
No dinner.
Yeah, right, seriously, or no iPad, right, or whatever it is.
Kids and their iPads, but yes.
And I feel like this makes sense. I don't think it's an evil way to parent. I mean, you certainly need to have, you know, boundaries, and there needs to be some sort of value in their behavior. But by consistently doing this, I started wondering, am I creating a lack mentality in my children? Like by letting them know, hey, this will not exist. I'm taking this away from you. And then they get upset. And there's this natural feeling of, oh my gosh, no, please don't take it away. Right?
Gosh.
Well, they're 3 and 6, so, you know. But that's where the emotion is. It's like, oh my gosh, you're taking this from me. I can't have it anymore.
So if I want to keep the things that I have, I should do XYZ,
Right.
which I guess can teach discipline and structure and focus and direction. And I mean,
behavior. We have standards in our family. It's
and
like,
morality. Yeah, you know, all those different things. But it definitely does kind of lead into a lack mentality.
Intentionally or not, right?
Intentionally or not. And I grew up very strict Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
Which a lot of it is very...
Rules.
There are a lot of rules. I mean, I definitely think that my upbringing gave me a very strong moral compass in a lot of ways, but there is kind of I'd rather do something out of love rather than the whole fear of,
right.
Internal damnation. I get that, but it's more so like I'd rather, run towards something than away from something.
Yeah.
So I see what you mean when it creates that lack mentality. And the question that I asked you right before we hit record was, well, what about desire? Is desire a lack mentality?
I would say no.
Okay.
I guess depending on, so absolutely not, in my opinion, just using the basic description of desire, because to desire something is to want to have an experience.
Okay.
And by desiring something, I desire $10 million. I don't believe that that's not coming to me. I don't believe that it's lack, like, oh, I don't have it now. I desire it. I intend to work towards being and having it as part of my experience. But I don't feel like, oh, I don't have it. I don't feel like it's lack. It's more of pursuit. Kind of like run. In fact, similar to running towards, as opposed to feeling like you can't run. So not running away from, but being stuck without.
Okay. So I get that, right? So it's the want of a certain experience, the running toward rather than running away. I get that, but you're still attached to something. And I guess it's not necessarily lack, but in this moment of now, you lack what it is that you're running toward, which is propelling you. That lack is propelling you toward it, possibly?
It's really about the energy, how you show up with the situation, right? So desire, you can have desire for something and then treat the awareness of that desire with a lack. Oh, I'm never going to get that. Or you can have the desire and treat it with pursuit and drive. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because Theresa was itching her eye.
I was so focused on what you were
Know,
saying. I was wondering what you were laughing at.
That's why I was genuinely impressed, because you actually had one eye open and the other one also open while you were, I couldn't tell if you were actually scratching your eye, but you were focused on me. It was
I got like a thing.
Very impressive.
My eyeball actually I get bad allergies. I told you I had the allergy thing today. Yeah.
There's no I in TEAM.
Well, there's an EYE in eyeball. So
true.
Let's have a ball. Oh, high five.
All right.
There it is.
We digress.
So I get what you're saying. So in kind of the Buddhist philosophy, all suffering stems from desire.
Okay.
So the idea is to be completely unattached. Not necessarily, and granted, there's a lot to know about Buddhism. It goes very deep and there's a lot. But simplistically, one of the kind of core tenets there is that all desire and attachment is the source of suffering. So love, hate, everything. So it's interesting to have, I guess, desire in that respect versus knowingness. So there are certain things that I just know. And that I could have told you, like even getting a job here. Do you remember that whole, like, I know I'm going to live in Jersey City. I know exactly who my roommate's going to be. We're going to live in a certain place. I know when I'm going to start working here, wherever I was at the time, all that stuff. Like, I just knew.
Yeah.
And everything I did aligned to, like, all of my actions, my thoughts, everything that I did, the people I talked to, everything directed toward that because I knew that that was what's going to happen. Not necessarily like I quote unquote wanted it to happen. I mean, granted, yes, it was really awesome, but it was that knowingness. And I think that might be a little bit of the difference between desire with like an attachment or a lack versus a knowingness.
Okay.
Does that make sense, or am I off base here?
No, so
validate me, sir.
No, but knowing and pursuing with like a passion, I think are two different things.
Fervor, okay.
Right? So maybe when you said the desire as a many times mentioned fan of Napoleon Hill, that's, chapter 1 is desire.
Statement of desire.
Right.
What do you want?
Chapter 1 is desire. What do you want? How are you going to get it? You remind yourself of it. So when I first heard you ask that question, how does desire have to do with lack? It occurred to me, no lack as much as the opposite. It's like, okay, not the lack, but creation of, right? So I'm creating it.
Gotcha.
So when you just say now, knowing like, hey, I'm aligned with my path, and I feel like I know where it's going. I feel like that's different from desire as well.
Yeah, it definitely is, because I had no desire to become a coach. I had no desire for a career. I never wanted to work for anyone else. Like, and here
now look
I
what
am.
happened. You got both.
Yay!
And more.
Yeah. But no, it's just an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah.
You know?
That's fair.
It's a good word.
So I guess my point in really even bringing this up is how are we as, I mean, you started touching on it being raised very Catholic or strict Roman Catholic, how are our old patterns of behavior, or how are we teaching young people? What's a way to infuse morality and good, for lack of a better term, habits as a person, as a young person, to show up without being a consequence of lack?
That's a really good question.
What would be different? Is it to go more for, and there's probably like a whole psychological, like meaning like psychology, like, oh, of course you shouldn't say that, and you could say this.
Somebody dedicated to the life to answering that question, and there's going to be a PhD somewhere who's like, I did that.
I can't believe you know that. You don't know that. I wrote a whole paper back in 1979 on the value.
I'm actually
Dr. Spock.
I am the expert in these things. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking the first thing that comes to mind is like, if you really want to have a moral compass, like being in a church a lot, or like, my parents used to drop us off at the convent, and, we'd hang out with the nuns for a while, like stuff like that. And
On a Thursday.
Quite literally on a Thursday, especially Holy Thursday.
Yeah.
And, Thursday prayer, the whole thing. And I think, it's the difference, and I struggle with this sometimes, very much so, with the parts of me that I'm still working, that are like kind of in the depths of who I am, like the gaps.
Yeah.
Where for the most part, all of you aligns, except you have habits or like residuals or things that creep up, and there's still those opportunities for growth. So you have these concepts, these things, like the concept of morality and the questions that you ask or are asked and answered in coachy settings and things like that, and these eureka moments. And there's the concept, but then there's like when it actually becomes part of who you are.
Right.
So I still have those, definitely, but when I think about how I actually maintained, like, I really do realize the more that I'm out in the adult world, the kind of moral compass I have.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes from suffering and experiencing the other end of things, but really being empathetic and compassionate, which I struggle with sometimes, because you can get lost in that sometimes, which is really difficult.
Are you saying you struggle with being compassionate, or you struggle with how much you are compassionate?
Well, it's kind of like opening the floodgates sometimes, because it's kind of like George Carlin has this thing. He's like, we're all environmentalists. Save the whales, save that snail. It's like you almost have to pick your battles on some level.
Yeah.
But Gary Vaynerchuk talks about how a lot of times empathy is really what creates a decent human being.
Sure. Understanding somebody else's experience.
Yeah.
Or seeking to understand someone else's experience on some level.
Seeking to, but not just, it's kind of like, okay, you can hunt for the treasure, but the guy who actually finds it is the one that's like really, that internalizing piece. So it's really stepping into empathy. And I think instead of coming from a place of lack, I think coming from that place of empathy and really kind of showing someone the experience of, hey, when you do this, this is what it feels like for the other person, or this is what it feels like, this is the possibility. Because my parents never, they took us to church a lot, like definitely, but I was never grounded as a kid. Right. You just knew.
Well, so what was the consequence? That you knew? What does that mean? I've heard you chat about, in fact,
you just like your
know. Dad, right? But
it's
you know what? That you're misbehaving. You know that that's not the way to show up.
You just don't do it. Whatever it is, you just don't do it. And I've talked to my mother about this, in my entire life. And my mom and I had some really, big disconnects, especially because, it was just a different time. But the one thing, I never raised my voice to her, and I never used any curse word ever. Ever. Period. Right. You just don't. And it's just a matter of decent human respect.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess, but it wasn't, we didn't have that kind of, it's going to get taken away. No dessert. We never had dessert anyway.
Right. So there's really, and what's going on in my brain is really it's an opportunity for the again, I'm bringing it back to me, but the parent in this
No,
situation, right? If what I would like to do is remove that opportunity for my kids to have an experience of lack. Opportunity isn't the right word. Experience where if I want to remove that from them, when they're misbehaving or not behaving the way that they could be, to give them other solutions. Like to really, it comes down to me not being angry, and really using it as a tool. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so I'm probably angry. You know what? You're gonna behave that way. You don't get this. Fine, I'm taking this from you. There's probably more anger there than I'm aware of.
I mean, it definitely sounds like it a little bit, maybe, but
Those motherfuckers.
well, those, yeah, kids.
Right.
They're like little tiny humans. They're a little drunk all the time. But I think I forgot what I was going to say. But along the lines of maybe removing your own anger.
That's what I mean. So it's really about being present and aware. Okay,
Yeah.
what do I really want? I want them to stop jumping on the table and screaming. So if I could say, "Oh, I'm going to take away your friends," or I could say, what do you think I'm going to say right now? Like the reason. But to your point, it's just about what you're doing, not about what you're not going to get based on what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess definitely. But like, what's the problem with them running and jumping and screaming on the table? Like, what's just from a very, I know you're looking at me like, Theresa, I want to punch you. I know you don't have kids. You don't get it. Feet on the table.
Well,
but what's the problem?
It's the problem is that it's just not how we behave. It's just standards at our house. Or if I ask you to do something 7 times.
Okay, so that's a little different.
Yeah, and on the 7th time, instead of getting dressed and we're late to go someplace, you are jumping on the table and doing something different.
Yeah, I was going to say, because in my house it was a little different.
Right.
Where my dad was more the strict one.
Yeah.
And we knew that when Dad got home, like my mom used to pull back the rug in the dining room, and I don't know where she got a whole bunch of tap shoes, but we would just like tap dance away on the dining room floor. And when my dad got home, she'd pull the carpet back over the floor.
That's it, quick.
Yeah. So it was just like, different parenting styles, I guess. But like, we just knew like when Dad's home, you just don't tap dance on the floor,
And so, go ahead if you want to add.
Well, it's not like we're like, oh, when Mom tells us to do something, we do it. When Dad tells us to do something, we don't. It wasn't like that kind of thing, but it was just like understanding what is respectful for one person's experience, like how to be respectful of their experience over the other.
So if there's 2 sides to that coin, are there 2 different things that you've taken away that have served you or not served you in life from those 2 different parenting styles?
Well, everything changed when my dad passed away.
Yeah.
So I didn't,
It was a younger age.
Yeah, I was pretty young, but I can't really, like there wasn't really enough there to kind of really draw some sort of assumption, I guess.
Yeah.
I always say that the best thing that ever happened to me though was being born the youngest, because I'm sure that my older siblings could tell you that their experience of our entire upbringing was totally different than mine.
Right.
And I really got to watch them make all the quote unquote mistakes.
Yep.
They deemed them as mistakes. I looked at them as opportunities for growth.
Right.
But I mean, you can see how each one of us responded differently to the way that each of our parents definitely did raise us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see the fear-based, you can see bitterness, you can see anger, you can see joyfulness, you can see fondness, all of those things.
And as we've talked in the past, it's interesting because who your parents were when your oldest sibling was born were not who your parents were when you were born.
Dude,
you know what I mean?
You opened my eyes to that. I don't know if you want to explain that a little bit, but I know you have 2 kids, and it was different when the second one was born. That was amazing.
Well, I can do briefly. I will say that it's like people say, "Oh, well, it's like why aren't siblings the exact same?" Right? Just in your brain, it's like same parents, same house, same town, same school. They should be very similar, and so often they are.
Yeah, well, I look at my family and I'm like, oh man, we're so different. It's awesome.
But what's the age difference between oldest and youngest?
For us, it's all 2 years. So my oldest brother is 8 years older than me.
So 8 years difference.
Mm-hmm. That's a good chunk of time.
Right. So you figure the difference in anybody's life in 8 years.
Oh, I don't even want to think about it. What year is it? 2017? 2009. I was wait. How many is? Yeah, that's like that's a whole different life.
So you were a completely different person. So let's just say you were a parent for the first time in 2009, and now you're a parent for the 5th time today. You're going to be completely different, not only because you're a different person, not only because you've had children in between who've led you to understand different ways of parenting or different lessons or different, well, who knows? but you're just a different person based on your whole life experience everywhere.
Yeah.
And so to add to that, the consistency of being a parent, that you're constantly being learned from, like it or not, the younger people have it different. I don't want to say better or worse, because it's definitely, depending on the situation, going to be either or neither.
I mean, yeah,
obviously,
that's true.
in your experience, turned out better. Just
no,
or best, I should say.
Oh yeah, of course, definitely. Whew, 5 for the win. But I mean, I definitely see that. It's a unique and interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because I think about even just now, and even the relationships I have with just my sister, my brothers, my mom.
Yeah.
And even just friends. It's definitely different, so I can't even imagine what it's like with kids. I have to imagine, though, that a lot of it really does come down to that empathy. Like, my dad was really sick, so you just didn't do certain things because he was in so much...
That's a whole other piece to it.
Yeah, he was in so much pain. There was a lot of, other things. And you can physically, you can see it. You could feel it. It was palpable sometimes.
Yeah.
So, like, you didn't even want to talk back. Like, there was just no whatever. Like, you just...
Right.
Nope. So
it's the consequence is comfort, or for others as well as yourself. You don't want to upset somebody. You don't want to be upset.
Sure. So I think, like, for my family, and that kind of instilled a bit of a people pleasing aspect to me for a long time.
Yeah.
But like to kind of pull it back, I don't know how. It's really interesting. How do you kind of create discipline without, I guess, incentives?
Well, that's really the question. Is the incentive to... It feels like it's incentive, but it's not. And I'm talking about what we have been doing. It feels like incentive. It's like, hey, if you do this, you're allowed to do what you were supposed to be doing anyway. So it's kind of backwards. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, we scheduled for you to go to Joe's house, and for some reason you're misbehaving, so now you can't go. So they were supposed to go anyway, and so I mean the part of it that feels normal. It's like, okay, so we're not taking something away or not letting you get something. It was there. You could have it, but your behavior is
You're kind of being a dick right now.
Right,
so...
yeah. I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
I'm not trying to argue. I'm just telling you.
So the awareness piece is just, for me, it's like, okay, so how can I, because I really dislike lack mentality. I feel like it's a invisible disease on a majority of humans that I've come in contact with.
Agreed. Definitely agreed. And I think there's always the opportunity, because even for me, definitely, oh my gosh, the amount of books I've read, the amount of things I've been to, the constant daily practice, being around people like you constantly day in, day out, it still creeps up. Like, it's such an ingrained thing. Definitely. So there's a huge opportunity, I think, that you have, with these tiny humans that live in your house, your children.
So it comes down to, what's
the opposite?
Yeah. How do what's
the opposite?
Yeah, the opposite is abundance.
Okay.
Right? But so it's really just about taking the time to say, hey, this behavior is not appropriate.
Well, what would be instead that even circumvent all of that in general?
Yeah.
But how do you create that abundance mindset in your kid so they're like, I get to go see Joe? Like, how do you...
Right.
What's the thought around that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'm thinking out loud. I would say something along the lines of recognizing...
Oh, boy.
It's the tough part is it's a two-way street.
Here it comes. Yeah.
It's not just the kids' behavior, and it's also the adult behavior, right? The adult awareness. When you've had a long day and you've been doing whatever the experience of your day has been, and your kid is jumping on the table for the 17th time in the past half hour.
Okay.
And for you to just not want to take something away from them. It's a habit, really, right? It's a habit that we were probably taught when we were kids, and is now coming through on our children. So it's about changing that and being aware that you're taking something away from them and presenting that, and in the moment deciding what the other opportunity is.
Question.
Go.
If this wasn't a kid, if this was another live, tall, fully functional, non-tiny little drunk person adult,
right?
What would you do?
I would, great question.
I'm drawing on the Celestine prophecy here.
Yeah, and I will just prerequisite with there's a major difference because of the maturity level, the conversation. I know you're shaking your head. No, there's no difference in that.
No,
question.
There is, but that's not part of the question, I guess. And you're right, but I'm just looking at it differently. So you were saying.
But the appropriate response, I believe, would be to use the coaching Use coaching techniques. Recognize what the agenda is.
Does that work with the little guys?
You just told me that if it wasn't kids, what would it be?
Oh, okay, gotcha. I didn't know we were still on that. I was so focused on not shaking my head and just being present here.
Right.
And not getting lost in my mind. Yes, we're here.
But so yes, no, it doesn't work with kids. Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the point. So they're not normal, non-little drunk people. They are just all of those things. So it comes down to patience and presence for the individual, and knowing that the value.
You think so? Wow.
Yeah, and for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As the adult or whomever, let's just say it's a work situation, right, where somebody's misbehaving and they're not doing their job, and you need to connect with them on a regular basis, and they're not doing it. So what I would do is I would say, listen, we've talked about this is where we want to be. Use coach approach. Is the behavior that you're showing right now leading us to that's where we want to be?
I really, actually, I hear what you're saying, but in my personal experience with you, I don't think you would start with that. I think you would basically walk in and say, all right, what's really going on here?
I don't know if I would use those words.
Along those lines, maybe.
I might. No, I think I would. I would say depends.
Intention.
Yeah, we talked about this. Is this what's happening? Is this behavior leading us there?
Yeah, but so the whole idea of getting from point A to point B. So where are you? Where do you want to be? That's great, but it's really why are you where you are? What's the thing? Because I know a lot of times when we were kids, there was if there was anything, it was more of an attention thing. It was like I don't feel like I guess you could say like, oh, I don't feel loved enough as a kid. Not that the kid knows that. But I see it all the time. People just shove like an iPad in their kid's face. So their kid goes ballistic because all they want is some love. Like they want a hug. They want an interaction. Human, that kind of thing. Not saying that that's you.
Yeah.
But like, is there... No, I know. Because you and your kids are like, oh my gosh. It's amazing. But what's the driver behind that behavior, I guess?
Well, it's probably sometimes they're just being 6 and 3.
I wasn't like that as a kid, and I get every kid's different.
I know you feel like you weren't like that.
No, I definitely wasn't. I was a really reclusive child, really. Like, not reclusive, but I was really quiet. I had 4 older siblings that did all the talking and all the everything for me. I didn't really...
And I wasn't challenging you or calling you a liar.
No, I...
My point
Damn
was,
you!
Yeah. No, really, I was. More what I was saying is that sometimes it's, when you think about your thoughts as a 13-year-old, like they don't ever feel like they were immature. They feel like they were on point because that's exactly where you were and you were experiencing life as you at that moment.
But it's not the thought.
I think it's the same thing as 6-year-olds. Like they believe what they're saying and their acting is
I
normal, quote unquote.
I get what you're saying, but there's always a driver behind what you do, regardless of how old or how young you are. Baby cries because it wants to be fed, or it's uncomfortable, or it wants love and attention. So I'm curious if there's something like that.
Yeah, and the other... And
kids rebel because of the same thing in teen years.
And the other thing is that what I don't want to insinuate is this is all day long, every day.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? As much as I've just noticed over a weekend at home...
Look, Ryan, your kids
with
are
several children.
Terrible.
Yeah, just noticing when they do misbehave or they are off, like what the technique was for bringing them back that my wife was using a couple times, and I was kind of like, okay, well, it's like all of a sudden it was just screaming lack. Like, hey, I'm taking stuff away from you. Like, no wonder you feel like they're, or we as adults grow up feeling like, oh, there's not enough. Because they're constantly, as children, being taken away from us.
I feel like you just got to give them nothing so you have nothing to take away.
Maybe that's the
just
answer.
Lock them in a closet.
Maybe, well, no, that is definitely not
Maybe
the answer. I
with
just
like
want to say
an
publicly, Coachy Shit does not condone locking children in closets with oranges.
Not like that happened to me or
Right,
anything.
never.
No,
it was definitely an apple. So that was the topic for today. I was just curious as to how lack shows up in our life, like because so many people do live like from a lack mentality. So where does that start? Really, I guess is a different way to ask the question that this whole podcast was just about.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what about you? I mean, do you see that show up for you based on your experiences from when you were a child?
I don't, but I didn't really have that type of an upbringing. Like I grew up with a very extremely entrepreneurial father who, to a detriment, to a point where just,
Sure.
Everything was coming, don't worry about it, and like was just building things. He had, had a building company and like built houses and like did all these different things. And so there wasn't really an understanding of lack. And even when we were at a point, and there was points where like literally had 0 money and 5 kids and like wasn't an awesome place from a social standard or perspective.
Well, the whole thing.
kid, I don't remember like really knowing that. My older brother talks about it a little bit, but I don't really ever feel like, oh, we don't have enough. We don't have anything. And my mom was very, what we at IPEC call level 4, like just making
Very
sure
service
that,
oriented.
yeah, very service oriented. So even when things weren't good, like, she was mostly just about, again, taking us to church and making sure that everybody was taken care of and making sure that she was doing whatever my dad wanted to be done, that type of a thing. So I never really had that. And so I consider it a blessing because I don't really feel like I have a lot of it now in my natural way of being.
Yeah.
But to the opposite, like almost thought I was pointing, sometimes it's a point where not that lack is important, but some sort of structure and awareness and action to bring things into our life. I think that wasn't necessarily also followed through on. So my growth has been the ability to stay focused and decide what I want to bring and what I can do about it in the meantime. Whereas somebody else who's taught, listen, if you don't do exactly this, you're not going to have enough in life.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Exactly this might be go to school, go to college, get a job, stay there until you retire. While you're there, be sure you get the proper amount of insurance, be sure you get the proper 401k, be sure that
Get
you
married,
do this.
have 3.4 kids.
Yeah, and then when you're done, you can just go
garage.
be.
Yeah, no.
And I think that mentality was very strong in the 80s, right? It was like that's what everybody was doing. That's just what you did. And so many people who were raised during that time have, actually that's a vast generalization.
Well, it was a
but
very
people that I know.
strong
Yeah.
cultural norm. I mean, think about it. Even with my family, my mom always said, you go to school, you get a good job, you get married, you make a lot of money, you have a bunch of kids, and then you die.
Right.
Like, that's what you do.
Right.
And it was always that. It was like...
Now it's just not true.
It's just kind of like choose your own adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really interesting. And so the other thing that kind of came up when you were speaking, this whole like, I'm going to take this away. We would be punished. And like, I don't mean like, oh, they take something away. Like, we would be punished.
Right.
So like, you would have to stand in a corner for sometimes 2 or 3 hours at a time.
Right.
Like
no
literally,
oranges.
No oranges. You don't even get to sit down in the closet.
You didn't even get to smell an orange.
But like legit, we would stand with our nose in between the wall and the refrigerator.
Right.
Like you'd stand there. Or, my dad had a belt. He never hit us, but he would definitely, until you stick your hands out and he'd slap your hands really hard.
We had a wooden spoon.
Yeah, we had a lot of wooden spoons, a lot of metal spoons. My mom started using metal spoons after all the wooden spoons. She'd hit you until the spoon broke sometimes. Right. And she started getting those one solid piece metal spoons, and she'd hit you until it'd bend, and then she'd flip it over and hit you until it bent back. But either way.
My mom once had a thing called Mr. Indian.
That sounds racial.
It wasn't. It was a salad, like a wooden salad spoon.
Okay.
But it had an Indian head on the end.
Like, okay.
So it was like a giant, like used to toss salad, like a giant kind of decorative wooden, nice mahogany wooden Indian.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so if we were in trouble, she's like, might be time to get out Mr. Indian. No! Yeah, that's funny. I digress.
Yeah, but so that was the thing. We never, I guess it's a different kind of lack. It wasn't like, oh, you're not going to get to go here.
Well, a lack of a pain-free life.
Yeah, so it was basically like if you don't do what you're supposed to, you're going to get...
There are consequences.
Yeah, and like, my dad was a Nam. He knew some torture tactics.
Right.
Not to be discussed here, but, you know, he definitely, I guess that's definitely a lack mentality. I didn't really think about it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess the point is don't have kids.
That's it. Done and done.
Send them back!
Make it that much easier. I'd say the point is recognize where lack is showing up. And how our experiences, whether they be lack or they be anything else that we're trying to or would like to shift in our lives, if it's something that we don't like about it ourselves or we prefer to have different, to be aware of how we're projecting that on other people, especially those who are so influenced by who we are.
That's very true, definitely. And I would say that, it's not an overnight thing.
No, nothing is.
Yeah, I'm really learning that, though. I mean, you always say all the time, the long game, and I'm really, I've picked that up big time. And it's interesting because you think that you're good. You're like, lack.
Got it.
I lack. I'm so good at lacking
I
lack.
lack nothing.
That
Second.
I'm abundantly abundant. And then all of a sudden you're like, you do something or you say something or you have an experience, you're like, oh, no, okay. Long game.
Turns out unattached.
Still opportunities.
Yeah.
They abound.
every day.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I guess one last thing to mention that you mentioned to me like way back. You're like, when you have kids, it's the opportunity to teach them how to be a good human. Literally, you are an example in every single moment of your entire life for that child, for those children. It was really a profound thing,
That we forget.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for instance, what you have on television in the background when they're in the house with you. They're walking by.
I'm starting to wonder what I did as a kid, because we didn't even have a television most of the time.
What did you do?
I don't know. I cut you off, though. I'm
Oranges.
sorry. Closets. Sometimes an apple if you were lucky.
Churches. Occasionally hanging out with some nuns.
Yeah, there was definitely that. But the TV on the background, yeah, I mean, we talked about that when we talked about music.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's funny, I recorded video of my son, like, kind of, I was in my office, and in between my office and the stairs is, there's a television, and my wife was doing some ironing or something, and she had some show on the background. And so I came out of my office and was filming my son come up to me. Like, he was saying something that I thought was really cute and it was funny, so I wanted to film it. And then afterwards I looked at it, and all the thing was wonderful and it was cute and funny. And in the background of the video, there was like Real Housewives, like swearing, like beep, and, fighting and all this stuff that when I was videotaping, I had come out of my office. I wasn't even paying attention. I had no idea that it was on. While I was filming and I was paying attention to my son, I had no idea that it was on. But when I watched the video, I was like, oh my gosh, that is what my son walks by and is hearing at any given point if that's on.
You're going to see him soon. He's going to have a weave and tips, like
that's
the fake
it.
nails.
Just throwing tables around.
Hoop earrings. He's going to have the collagen injections in his lips. He's going to start chewing gum real loud and wearing heels. I'm kidding.
God willing.
Please.
I don't even know what that means.
But
the God willing part.
Hopefully not. But you never know. It could happen. But
the point being, children or not children.
Just humans.
Let's be aware of, first, awareness. How are we showing up? Is it serving us? And if it's not serving us, how is it serving others as well? And if it's clearly not serving us, then it's more than likely not serving others.
And the strive to lack.
Well, just be more.
Gotta lick the lack habit.
Decide to be more present and bless others.
Present, patient, and joyful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Should we wrap it?
With a bow.
Was that Coachy Shit? Was that enough Coachy Shit, you think, for episode 14/1?
I almost feel like we talked a lot about kids, which I'm usually allergic to. This is kind of a cool thing.
Nice.
Coachy Shit. I think we Coachy Shit.
I'd say we Coachy Shit. Musical recommendation for today.
Ooh, I'm gonna pull I did last week. How about you go this week?
Actually, I did last week. We talked about Regina Spektor.
Oh, I gave
the week before that, you had Band of Horses.
Song. Yeah, I did Samson.
I mean, I'm happy to come up with something somewhere.
Yeah, that would be good, because I'm really drawing a blank, because I've been on repeat for certain songs, I focus.
Big fan of the Avett Brothers.
Oh.
In fact, I just sent you a song today of them, 10,000 Words, which I think was very cool.
Oh, the song that you asked me to listen to and give you an opinion on?
I did, yeah.
Probably in preparation for this podcast?
Nah, just because...
yeah, I didn't listen to it yet. Sorry, man, I'll get there.
No requirements.
I hear it's a good one.
So, Avett Brothers, they're these two guys. I think they're from North Carolina. I don't know how I would describe it as... It's not folk music. It's acoustic, but there's some rock. It's
folky shit?
It's folky shit, but folky pop shit. I don't know. But really amazing music.
Sounds painful.
They write great music. Musicians. They have
awesome.
Poignant lyrics. And I don't know. The more I listen to them, the more I'm really impressed by their songwriting.
Nice.
So I would recommend them for anybody who wants to check them out. We'll put something on the Facebook.
Super cool.
Yeah, something. She's Theresa Rezga.
And he just happens to be Ryan Stanley.
And this is the Coachy Shit This is the Coachy Shit podcast.
podcast.
Thanks for being you. We'll see you next week.
Bye.